You're watching Pat Plays. It's time for another episode of Coffee and Nostalgia, and today I want to yet again take a look at one of my favourite scenes from one of my favourite films. And this time we will be taking a look at a scene from Gremlins 2: The New Batch. So, from previous Coffee and Nostalgia episodes, you already know that this is one of my favourite films. I previously showed you my DVD and Blu-ray collection of the first film and the sequel. There was the box set of the two films on DVD, the two separate Blu-ray editions of the films Gremlins and Gremlins 2, which I have, and then those recently purchased Japanese Laserdisc releases of the first film and its sequel. So, just like the last film that we looked at, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 2, this is another instance where I prefer the sequel over the original film. And that's mostly because, again, this is an instance where the first film did really well, so the studio gave the director a ton of money and said, please make a sequel to that film. And because he knew he wasn't going to be able to make anything as good as the original movie, he thought, why not just go absolutely insane with it, be completely meta, break the fourth wall, and make a full-on parody of the first film. And that is exactly what you get with Gremlins 2: The New Batch.
Our moviegoers so desperate for entertainment that this kind of trash is cast for fun. Whoa, wait a minute! Wait, just kidding! Ow! A 10! It's a 10!
So, in the first film, you had the Gremlins taking over the small, quiet town of Kingston Falls, but in the sequel, the Gremlins are running riot inside a high-rise, smart office building in the middle of New York City. And one of the main things which made this film stand out to me as a kid was the animatronics and the creature effects which were created by Rick Baker, who famously said that he would only work on the sequel to Gremlins if he was able to have creative control over the look of the Gremlins and to give each one of them a totally different personality. And we get to see this right away in the scene where Gizmo accidentally gets water on him and so he begins to multiply, and we're introduced to the insane cartoon-like Daffy Mogwai. Then you've got the very serious George and his dopey friend Lenny, who are of course named after the Of Mice and Men characters. And then finally we have the main villain of the film, Mohawk. I actually still own a replica of the Mohawk Mogwai, which I bought probably about 8 years ago now. And this was a Japan-only release, which was made by a Japanese toy company called Jun Planning. And I absolutely love the detail on this thing, and it's actually worth a pretty penny these days. This model actually made an appearance in the third Epic Lunchtime episode, which was released in 2012.
Look at this! Look at this! We filled Big Mama's cauldron with 18 different types of pot noodle. We got our usual friends, Coke. And
you can also see this little guy featured in the background of the Wiz Khalifa parody, My Nintendo, which we released in 2011. So I guess it's actually closer to 10 years ago that I actually bought this thing. So the other thing that makes Gremlins 2: The New Batch so awesome is the fact that inside this smart office building, one of the floors is a genetics research laboratory. And so the Gremlins break into this lab, start drinking different potions and hormones, and mutating into different gremlin creatures. So for example, you've got the vegetable gremlin who drinks the vegetable medley.
It's eating my vegetable medley. What is that noise they're making?
I think they're laughing. Then what are they, Martin? A virus?
Then you've got the brain gremlin who drinks a brain hormone and becomes smart, and he's able to speak for the rest of the film.
Talk a little bit about what's going on in this room, because I think there are some fascinating ramifications here for the future.
Then you've got the awesome looking bat gremlin, and since this was a Warner Brothers film, they're able to do that joke where he flies out the side of the building and leaves a Batman shaped logo behind. And the Bat Gremlin goes on to have its own scene where he's terrorizing Larry Futterman, and after being covered in cement, he solidifies on the side of a building like a gargoyle. That's an awesome scene, but that's not the scene that I want to talk about. A couple of other notable gremlin mutations are the female gremlin that of course drinks some sort of female hormone potion and changes its gender. And then you've also got the electric gremlin. This electric gremlin actually comes back towards the end of the film and is used to electrify all the gremlins in order to save the day. But now let's go back to that Mohawk Mogwai, who goes on to hatch out of his cocoon with reptile-like spikes going down his back. And this is one of my favourite creature designs in any film ever.
What if they're eating in an airplane and they cross a time zone? I mean, it's always midnight somewhere.
And this guy goes on to have a mutation transformation of his own, and that's after drinking some sort of spider hormone and of course becoming a spider gremlin. And that brings us on to my favourite scene of this film. So it starts off with this awesome stop motion reveal of the Mohawk gremlin in his new spider form. And then we get to see some incredible close-ups of the spider gremlin puppet as it makes its way closer and closer to its victims. And the design of this thing is just so fucking cool. And anybody out there who's not a fan of spiders would probably find this thing terrifying. So just as the Mohawk spider gremlin is about to devour his prey, Gizmo returns and he's in full Rambo mode, and in true Rambo fashion he fires a flaming arrow at the Mohawk gremlin. Now, in the DVD commentary for this film, the director Joe Dante actually tells us that this was the second time that they shot the Spider Gremlin puppet being set on fire. Because the first time they did it, the team that were working on the puppet covered the thing in too much rubber cement. And so when they were filming and they set it on fire, it literally went up in seconds and all they could see on the film reel was just white. So they had to go back and rebuild the entire puppet again from scratch and then reshoot that entire scene. And speaking of rebuilding the puppet, there's actually a Gremlins fan who recently uploaded a video to YouTube showing him rebuilding his own replica of this Mohawk Gremlin spider puppet using the original molds which they used for the puppet in the actual film. And seeing how much time and effort this guy put into bringing this piece of movie history back to life actually makes me feel like less of a crazy fan and more of just a normal person. So I might not have my own life-size prop replica of the Spider Gremlin, but what I do have is this figure replica which was released by NECA in 2014, I think it was. So this is one of my favourite models that I've ever purchased, and they've done such an awesome job of making it look just like it does in the film. The detail on this little guy is fantastic. NECA also released a regular version of the Mohawk Gremlin, and this guy came packaged with the machine gun which he uses in the film. Another thing that I love about that Spider Gremlin scene is the music. And this is actually a piece of music which I would go on to use in the film Groogle, which was released in 2010. And so as an homage to that Spider Gremlin scene, we have this scene from Groogle where towards the end of the film, my character is locked at the end of a long school corridor and the Groogle is slowly making its way towards him. Which of course mirrors the Spider Gremlin slowly making its way towards its victims. And to make it even more of an obvious homage, I decided that we should use that same piece of music. What the? Stop! What was that? Oh,
You get off him!
So there you have it, just another short and sweet video taking a look at one of my favourite scenes from one of my favourite films. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Coffee and Nostalgia. Thanks for watching, and I will see you again next time.